Hello. Thanks for joining me once again for another class on memorizing the Bible. You know what I'm trying to do is give you just some tools that might help you memorize what you've read in the Bible. And I'm just trying to give you a memory tool here. And I'm sure that there are other memory tools available. I'm just giving you one that I've used that's helped me. And when you read through Scripture, and I'm trying to encourage you to read through Scripture, come up with your own word. What helps you understand this book of the Bible, or this chapter in the Bible, or this paragraph in the Bible? As you read a paragraph in the Bible, one good question to ask is, what is it saying? How can I just find this one paragraph in a sentence, or even in a word? And how can I describe this chapter in one word, or one phrase? And how can I memorize what this whole book is about? And that's what I'm trying to do. Just give you some memory tools to help you. I mean, how many times we read the Bible through and you think, wow, I'm not sure I really remember what that book's about. I'm a little bit confused, and I've studied this so many times, but I can't really tell you what the book's about. Well, I'm trying to solve that problem by just helping you have one tool. And so the tool that I've used for years is just trying to attach one word, to a book of the Bible that helps me remember what the entire book is about. And then as you've done that, as you master that, then you go back and you say, okay, now I'm going through the chapters of the Bible and saying, what are those chapters about? And so you can continue to break things down. So now we're just through the book of the law, the first 5 books. We've looked at that. And now we are at the first book of history. We're at the book of Joshua. So before we begin the book of Joshua, let's do a little bit of review. Let's start with the book of Genesis. If you had to describe the book of Genesis in one word, what one word might you use? Here's my high-tech visual aids. One word I've used is the beginning. It helps us understand the beginning of all creation, the beginning of sin, the beginning of our languages, the beginning of a covenant relationship with the Hebrew people. It shows us the beginnings of a lot of things, and we begin to understand what the entire book's about by understanding what the first things were all about. So Genesis in one word is beginning. I also have used the phrase 4 by 4. Genesis is about 4 by 4. That helps me. I remember there's 4 main characters and there are 4 main events. The 4 characters are Adam, of course, right there in the very beginning. And then you have Noah, and then you have Abraham, and then you have Joseph. These are the 4 characters that are predominant in the book of Genesis. Of course, there are other characters in the book of Genesis, but these are the predominant ones. And there are 4 main events. We have the creation itself, and then you have the flood, the fall rather, and then the flood, and then the covenant made with the Hebrew people. Now, of course, there are other things involved in the book of Genesis, but this helped me remember what the entire book's about. Now, when I go to Exodus, what is the book of Exodus about? Well, I use a simple word, exit. It sounds like Exodus. And I remember that it begins with the life of Moses. And Moses is called by God to come and help the Hebrew people come out of Egypt. And we have the plagues on Egypt recorded in the book of Exodus. And we have them coming out of Egypt. And we see the great power of God. And then he gives the law on Mount Sinai. And so in Exodus, the 20th chapter, you find the 10 Commandments there. Well, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus. Now, Leviticus is one of those books of the Bible that the very word helps me. Levi. I remember, okay, Levi. Levites are priests. I think of Leviticus, I think of the priest. And what are priests interested in? Well, they're interested in the sacrifices. They're interested in the feast. And so this explains those feasts and sacrifices and many of the laws given to the Hebrew people. And then there is the Numbers. Numbers is about the wanderers. The wanderers in the wilderness. First he numbers them, and then they wander, and then they grumble. They're grumblers, and then they rumblers. They fight these people that have these battles against God's enemies. And so Numbers is, in one word, it helps me remember, well, it's about wanderers. And they number the people, they wander through the wilderness, and they grumble, and then they rumble. And then there is the book of Deuteronomy, which we looked at last week. Now, Deuteronomy is the second telling of the law. In one word, it's law. It is found in 3 different sections. The telling, the reminiscence about how they had gone through the wilderness, the retelling of the law, and then the urging of the people to obey the law. That's Deuteronomy. Now, the book of Joshua we're going to look at today, Joshua takes up where Deuteronomy ends. And so Moses writes the first 5 books of the Bible, and then Joshua takes over. You have the call of Joshua at the end of Deuteronomy, and you have the book of Deuteronomy. Now then, if I had to describe Joshua in one word, I use the word conquest. That's what it's about, the conquest of Palestine. Now, the first 12 chapters, you could say that is a book of war, and then chapters 13 through 24, the last half of the book, is a book of peace. So you have the book of war, the conquest, and then you have the book of peace, the division of the land. You can call it the dividing of the land, the conquest of the land. What helps you remember what the book of Joshua is about the best? It's about conquest. There were 7 years of conquest. 3 major campaigns of dividing and conquering. First, they cross the Jordan River, and then they go south, and then they come north. So you see these 3 campaigns. In chapter 1, verse 11, God says, "Pass through the midst of the camp and command the people, saying, prepare provisions for yourselves, for within 3 days you are to cross this Jordan to go and to possess the land which the Lord your God is giving you to possess it." Now, one of the things I want us to notice is that God is giving them the land to possess the land. This is something that God is doing. It's theirs to possess. And then at the end of this period of conquest, in chapter 11, in verse 23, it says, "So Joshua took the whole land according to all that the Lord had spoken to Moses, and Joshua gave it for an inheritance to Israel according to their divisions by their tribes. Thus the land had rest from war." And so Joshua was able to give the people this land. They had conquested the land, and they had victory, and now they're dividing the land. And one of the things we see in the book of Joshua is that faith is a participation with God. We participate with God in life. God is here with us. I mean, look at the book of Hebrews in chapter 11. By faith, these people did certain things by participating with God. I mean, they acted, but God was the one who did everything for them. And in this book, we see the same thing. We see God acting with them. All of life is a participation with God. Marriage is a participation with God. We choose, but God joins us together. In the book of Acts, chapter 20, Paul says that the elders there, the Holy Spirit had made them overseers. Well, the churches chose those men to be elders of the church, but God made them elders. God put them into place. So faith is participating with God. God is giving them the land, but they are going to have to possess it. It's like a gift. Any gift that you give, you're going to have to take it, and you're going to have to receive it. And that's what the land was. They had to receive it from God. And so Joshua sends spies out to Jericho, and the famous story there of Jericho and Rahab. Rahab, the harlot, is one of the predominant characters here, and she's going to become part of Jesus' lineage. In chapter 11, verse 9, she has this great statement of faith. In chapter 2, verse 9, she says to the men, "I know the Lord has given you the land, and that the terror of you has fallen on us, and all the inhabitants of the land have melted away before you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the two kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. And when we heard it, our hearts melted, and no courage remained in any man any longer because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in heaven above and on earth beneath. What a tremendous statement of faith. And this is something that they'd heard happen 40 years before. It made such an impact on them. They remembered it here now 40 years later. And so they're going to cross the Jordan River and take Jericho. Now you have the tribes of Gad and half tribe of Manasseh on the east side. They stay there. Mm-hmm. And now the rest of the tribes, including the tribe of Gad, Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh, they are going to come with them and fight, but they're given the inheritance on the east side of the river. Reuben, Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh. So they come and they come to Jericho, and you remember the story, I hope, how the odd way of conquering it. They marched around the city one time every day for 7 days. On the seventh day, they marched around 7 times. The priests blew their trumpet, the people shouted, and the walls came down, and they conquered the land. And so after this, there's a very important thing that happens in chapter 5. The people are going to consecrate themselves. In chapter 5, verse 5, all the people who came out of the land of Egypt were circumcised, but all the people who were born in the wilderness along the way as they came out of Egypt had not been circumcised. So all those people, all those men had to be circumcised. And this takes place here, first of all. The circumcision that God gave them to be a distinguishing mark on them was taken care of. And then the second thing that happens, which is very interesting, is the Passover is observed. That Passover, the reminder of them coming out of Egypt. And that day they ate of the fruit of the land, and the next day the manna ceased. People ask, well, when did the manna ever stop? Well, it stopped that day after they had ate of the fruit of the land. And then the commander of the Lord of the army of God appeared to them. It's amazing. Verse 13. Now it came about when Joshua was by Jericho that he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a man was standing opposite him with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went to him and said to him, Are you for us or for our adversaries? And he said, No, rather I indeed come now as captain of the host of the Lord. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and bowed down and said to him, What has my Lord to say to his servant? And the captain of the Lord's host said to Joshua, Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy. And Joshua did so. This is a pre-incarnation of Jesus, the second person of the Godhead, the Lord of the army of God. Here is Jesus before he was Jesus, and they consecrated themselves. You know, before you have victory, there must be consecration. You have to set yourself apart for God. There's no consecration, there's no victory, no Gethsemane, there would be no Calvary. There has to be that period of dedication, of devoting yourself to God. And then, of course, Jericho is defeated. I already mentioned that. I mentioned that probably out of chronological order. It comes next in chapter 6. And then there's the story of Ai. And victory after victory. I'm not going to mention them all, but you can go through and see the victory after victory. The idea of victory means there is warfare. And there's always going to be warfare. And God's people today still have adversaries. 2 Timothy 2:3, endure hardship as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. Ephesians 6:12, for our struggle, there is a battle going on. We are not POWs being held by Satan. We are the church of the living God, and the gates of hell will not prevail against us. Sometimes we think of hell coming to grab us, but the gate, that's the part of the city that held off the enemy. And where are we? We're at the very gate of hell. They're not trying to conquer us. We're trying to conquer them. And Satan will be defeated. And so you have the conquest of the land in the first part of the book. And then the last part of the book is the division of land, dividing the land. What do I have to say about that? Well, all you have to do is read it. You're going to find that this is really tedious reading. I mean, it is mind-numbing reading. Chapter 15, verse 1. Now the lot of the tribe of the sons of Judah, according to their families, reached the border of Edom, southward to the wilderness of Zin, at the extreme south, and their south border was from the lower end of the Salt Sea, from the bay that turns to the south. Then it proceeds southward to the ascent of Acharim, and continued to Zin, then went up by the south of Kadesh Barnea, and continued to, well, you know what, that's rough. It's going to be rough reading. And so here's the details of the division of the land. This would be important for the people reading this, because they would tell them where their inheritance lies. And then finally in chapter 21, verse 25, or chapter 21, verse 45, it says, not one of the good promises which the Lord had made to the house of Israel failed. All came to pass. So God was true to his word. And in chapter 23, verse 14, we have a very similar statement, I believe. Now behold, today I'm going the way of all the earth, and you know in all your heart and in all your souls that not one word of all the good words which the Lord your God spoke concerning you has failed. All have been fulfilled, for you not one of them has failed. So God was faithful and true to his word. Now in chapter 24, it's one of the key chapters, if not the key chapter in the book of Joshua. You have history being reviewed, and then you have these great statements made by Joshua. In chapter 24, verse 14, now therefore fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and truth, and put away the gods which your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. And if it's disagreeable in your sight to serve the Lord, choose for yourself today whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served, which were beyond the river, are the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are now living. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. A lot of people have that as plaques in their house. As for me and my household, we will serve the Lord, and God is going to be served. And the people respond in verse 21, but we will serve the Lord. And in verse 24, we will serve the Lord our God, and we will obey his voice. So, Joshua, how do you describe the book of Joshua? It's about, well, you can use the word victory. I use the word conquest. It's about inheritance. It's about a lot of things. One of the key things for me is back in chapter 1, verse 9. He says to Joshua, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not tremble and be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. That is one of the greatest promises we can hold on to as Christians, that God will be with us wherever I go. Part of the Great Commission, and lo, I am with you always, even until the end of the ages. God is with us. What can be better than God being with us? We don't have to live in fear. We don't have to live in terror. We don't have to live cowering. We can be strong and courageous. If God be for us, who can be against us? God is with us. And so you have this great book of Joshua. And if I'm going to describe the book of Joshua in one word, I'm going to use the word conquest. Like I say, you come up with a word that helps you. Well, I'm glad you got to join me today. Thanks for being with me. We'll see you next week. Have a great week.